Hello, Lucy here. I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate our thriving community. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but we have over 1,000 listeners, racking up nearly 3,000 views on YouTube and are closing in on 2,000 downloads, all in just 9 months. I mean, that's no small feat, and that's down to you. Thank you for your amazing support. You know, it's lovely to hear about all the connections and collaborations that are blossoming among you, our listeners, and the guests. If you love the show, then please do consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only boosts the show in the charts, but it also helps new listeners find the wilderness. So, share the episodes with your friends and family. And remember to subscribe to the Wilderness of Creativity podcast. Stay wild. Hello and welcome to the Wilderness of Creativity. Hannah Mayfield is a qualified financial advisor and the founder of What is Wealth, a financial education platform and podcast dedicated to empowering individuals in managing their personal finances. Hannah believes that true wealth encompasses much more than just the numbers in your bank account. In this episode, we explore the significance of financial education, the fundamentals of investing, and the intriguing intersection of creativity and money. Life can surprise us with unexpected turns, and Hannah shares insights on navigating those changes. Be sure to visit What is Wealth to start transforming your financial future. Right, let's get to the episode. How did you set up What is Wealth, and why did you set it up?
Yeah, so it was all quite accidental in a way. I feel like life just put me on, sometimes life puts you on a weird path and you're like, oh, I'm doing finance now. Okay. So I'm like really happy about it, but it was quite random. So my kind of I guess I'll tell you my money story a little bit. I grew up with a single mum, so I had one experience of money that was, working with what we had, and everything was fine, but it was a very scarce resource, kind of that experience. And then when I was 22, my dad died and I received a lot of money, and it was, he didn't make it to retirement. So there's, things like pensions. And so I had this lump sum of money. So I kind of went from this one extreme of being a student to then being like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this. And I don't know anything about, I know how to be really frugal with money. I don't know how to grow it or keep it or build wealth or invest or do any of that kind of thing. So it was this big learning of and I really saw myself like a custodian of it in a way. I was like, okay, I've got this money, I want to be really sensible and smart with it. So I started to learn about investing.
Yeah.
And then just honestly didn't talk about it for years, found it really hard to deal with. It's a really weird thing to receive money in that way. And people aren't always the most sensitive as well, which I get, because they're like, oh, you're really lucky. And it's like, yeah, money does open up different opportunities, but equally it's come from this really difficult emotional place. So it was a really weird few years there. It's a lot to navigate, and I kind of navigated it all, taught myself how to invest, and then I kind of started sharing it with my friends and was like, oh, you should, open up your stocks and shares ISA, which is a type of investment account. And, going through stuff with them, they're like, oh, wow, I never would have done this before. And, they started making money and they were like, oh, wow, this is actually quite simple, and you've made it really simple. And I just realized that people don't, especially women, I think, don't get to have these conversations. And it's quite unless you're in certain circles where this is discussed,
Mm-hmm.
you were brought up in a certain way where this was discussed, you just won't know this stuff. And that was annoying for me. I was like, this is really important information. This is literally we need money to survive. It's like a survival skill that we all just haven't really been taught. So
I don't remember being taught about anything to do with money in school.
No. I think there's a massive campaign going on now to try and get it to be mandatory in schools. But yeah, you just learn what your family unit is, and that, there's a lot of psychological stuff around that as well, about our relationship with money. And yeah, there's a big topic really. That's, it's quite easy not to think about, but when you start thinking about it, you're like, oh, this is quite a big thing.
Most of the things that I've learned about money and investments through my friends, because they are a little bit more savvy with money. And, I was freelance for a little while, so I didn't have that opportunity to invest as such. It was a case of hand to mouth. I was literally just paying my rent, feeding myself, looking for the next job, and I was lucky because I had a steady stream of money coming in, but I didn't have the confidence. And I think that's what it comes down to, isn't it? The confidence to look at the sort of investments that you could put your money into. And again, it's about like financial planning.
It is very much like, where do you want to be? And like you said, it's the real planning element. And that can be at whatever, it doesn't really matter how much you have. Like, I think being good with money, like one of my definitions would be like kind of knowing where you're at and where you're going. And, and that does involve things like looking at pensions, unfortunately, which is, it's like a bit of it's a bit of an unsexy thing to do. But when you kind of know where you're at, and you're like, people just feel better. They're like, they come away and they might have either, okay, I've got my savings goals, I've got some plans, like I know how long it'll take me to get there. Or, people who come to me that do have the larger amount of money, they might be like, okay, I know where I want to put this and how to grow it and what that'll mean for my future and like how I can rely on that in the future. And it just makes you feel a lot calmer, I think.
How can we get creative with our money?
I think like on the one hand, there's this kind of tangible, money is this tool to create your life, because it is, if you think about certain things, like you can sometimes put an amount to it. Like if I want to go on a certain travel experience, or if I want to take a 3-month mini sabbatical, like there are financial kind of actual numbers to that you could put. You can kind of put a goal number to those certain dreams, and especially and you kind of do have to think about them far in advance. Like some of these financial milestones they don't happen accidentally. They probably don't happen very quickly.
No.
So it is being quite intentional, being like, okay, maybe I could plan for like have a little pot that I put a bit into every day that's for a mini sabbatical. It could be like I was saying, I had a session once and it was like, okay, but you could set up a little Monzo pot, or whatever your banking is, a pot, and put £10 a month in, and then you can take yourself on a day that's like a creative reflective day at the end of the year where you like plan for the next year, or like doing those things in advance where maybe you can do it with like smaller amounts as well, and then plan something that actually could be having that whole day to do something, go to somewhere that feels expansive or creative and do things is actually could be quite life-changing.
Where would you kind of signpost people to start with?
I think the start is obviously less like, you can go outward, but it is kind of looking at yourself as well. I think a really good place to start is to like know your own numbers. And I always say, if you know, especially like just know your fixed cost that's coming out every month, like you'll have to, like you're kind of, like your roof over your head, your food on the table, if you've got to put petrol in the car to get to work, like those kind of, if you know what that number is every month, that's actually really powerful. If you just know it off the top of your head and you're like, yep, that's that number every month.
Yeah.
That kind of gives you actually a lot of foundational like information. Then once you start to be like, oh, okay, then what's coming in? And then that gap you have between the two is kind of your potential gap. Or, if you don't have that gap there, then it's kind of like, okay, what's the plan? Because, you might be in an overdraft or something like that. So it's being like, like I think you said like knowing your present situation as well. And just things like as well, like checking your bank account every day is really helpful. But yeah, definitely that's a scary one. That's how I feel.
Do that.
I feel like that about checking my screen time. Is like someone's like, yeah, check your screen time every day. I would feel sick. I'd be like, please don't make me do that. It probably would be quite helpful.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to be doing that anytime soon. But I mean, that was, checking my bank statement every month. I mean, some months I don't do that. And then I kind of go to my bank account and I'm like, oh, that went out and I didn't realize that had gone out. And every now and again, it's a little bit like doing a spring clean of your finances. Like if you're not checking that regularly, things can go amiss, can't they?
Yeah. So I think a good starting place is honestly like the present. And yeah, I do it sometimes. I do just, randomly, like you said, just scroll through my banking app and have a look. And I did one the other day and I was adding things up. I was like, oh, I'm doing quite a lot on groceries. Like I don't really know what to do with this information because that's quite a But I was like, oh, it's just a number that I wouldn't have, if you asked me how much I spend on it, I would have said less than that. So it's kind of interesting actually how we can be not that in tune with like what's actually going on with our money.
Things are so expensive as well at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are struggling. We can't get away from cost of living. It's just everything's so expensive and people are trying their very best to just survive, I think, financially. So it's difficult when you start thinking, right, what am I going to plan for the next 6 months or the next year? Because people just don't know,
Yeah.
you know. But I suppose when they come to you, it is just looking at, let's just tap into where we are and look at what we can be doing to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, I sound quite future focused with my work, because when you do understand how time impacts things, like, with investing, everyone probably has investments. If you have a pension, if you have like a private pension, that is all invested, and that is because that kind of needs to happen, and it needs to be a long-term thing that you ideally contribute to over time. So it is quite future focused, looking at, okay, where do I need to be? What do I need to be doing now? And like what tools can I use to maybe make that a bit easier, that process, or.
So are there any apps or any tools that you would suggest that we can use to get sort of more confident with budgeting and future planning?
I use Monzo, or like some of those banks like Starling, or I think some of them are coming more. They have the different pots.
Yes.
And that's really helpful, because there's a thing, and the kind of personal finance term for it's called a sinking fund. So it's basically these are those kind of like random costs that are maybe a bit more irregular. So like a holiday, or if you pay your car insurance all in one go, or like school holidays or Christmas, like those kind of random things, you can make a little pot for them on those kind of banks, and then put a monthly amount into those pots. So it just smooths everything out, so you don't have those random months where you're like, oh. And it also means you actually do, you're putting stuff aside, and you're doing things, and that can make you feel a bit more on top of things if that works for you, rather than it just all being in one account and one lump. It's actually quite nice to be able to split it out. So I'd say like having those kind of tools, and also it's good to bear in mind that I have on my side of my work, like I'm really passionate about women having more financial stability, security, and like confidence around their finances. But also I think money is like this really powerful tool in the world, and also something to consider with your bank is like maybe switching it to, if your bank is one that funds stuff like fossil fuels, like you might not have ever thought about it, but actually switching your bank can be really powerful in changing your financial institutions. And same with your pension as well. If you kind of switched it from a normal investment or whatever it's in a normal one, it might be funding like deforestation, fossil fuels, and all this kind of thing. And if you were able to switch it, basically that's like the most powerful thing you can do. I think there was a survey, it's if you switch your pension, it's 20 times more powerful than like going vegetarian, stopping flying, recycling.
Wow.
I can't remember the exact.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you the link to it.
Please do. Yeah, we'll put it
I've
in the
just
show
gone off the top
notes.
of my head. But yeah, it's crazy how powerful, like just thinking about what your money might be funding is as well. That's a bit of a side note, but
a really important one, because it is the bigger picture, isn't it? It's not just about you as a single person. It's like the whole impact of where our money's going, of what it's funding, like you said. Why is it that we don't think about these things? Why do you think women are only just starting to invest?
Well, one is, like you said earlier, you kind of knew about it mainly because your friends were speaking about it. So if you don't happen to be in that kind of circle, I think it just might not be on your radar. And secondly, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around particularly things like investing. So before I started investing in the stock market, which sounds really scary, it's just basically means you own little bits of companies.
Sell.
Yeah, it sounds like I thought it was like Wolf of Wall Street. I thought it was like gambling. Yeah. I thought you'd have to be like endlessly looking up graphs and like trying to pick winners, and like maybe it will go up, maybe it will go down. And then I realized like, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. And I have very like simple investing strategy that actually feels quite safe to me now. But yeah, I had this huge misconception it was going to be a really good way to lose money. And that was why I didn't do it for so long. I thought it was really, really risky. And actually that was just me, like I didn't actually understand it. And I hadn't had anyone to be able to have a conversation with those really. And I had tried to find kind of like financial advisors in the past. And to be honest, I hadn't found that helpful. They just didn't really explain anything. They were just like, yeah, give me your money and I'll manage it. And I was like, but I don't get it. Like it still doesn't feel secure. Like I'm not going to do something with my money I don't understand.
And I think that's it, is I just don't get it. And if you don't get something, you're not going to want to take that risk. Through a conversation with my friend Jenny, she talked about Money Farm. And I think that it's a stocks and shares sort of platform. So as somebody who is definitely not very confident with numbers and money, that feels quite a safe option for me. people just don't seem to have a lot of time these days to get these things in place. And I suppose that's where it's quite handy to have. I think you're like the money best friend, aren't you? Like somebody to come to and talk to, and you can guide people and give them that time to sit down and plan. I love that.
Yeah. And sometimes I think, it's one of those things you can put it off. I mean, literally for years. Like I have certain jobs that I've put off for years, like stuff like doing my will and things like that. And I'm like, oh God, I still want, it doesn't feel as urgent for me. I don't have children, but I'm like, oh, I should probably do that. And maybe if we just wind back a little bit, because some of the things you were saying. So when you're talking about just stocks and shares, when we're talking about investing, so you can invest in lots of different things, but investing in like the stock market, you're probably investing in stocks and shares. And that is literally just you owning a little bit of a company. So it sounds crazy, but it's like, okay, I own a little bit of this company. And that means like when that company makes profits, I get a little bit of those profits because I'm an owner. And the ways to think about it is like, okay, instead of like you probably buy stuff, I have an iPhone, so I buy stuff from Apple. So it's like, actually I could buy stocks in Apple. Like I could buy a bit of Apple, and then any money they make, I will get a little bit of as well, depending on how much money I've got in them. I don't actually pick the individual companies. I put my money in things like a fund, which is when they bundle all the companies together. So if you hear the word fund, it's like someone's just bundled all these bits of companies together for you, kind of like a bouquet of flowers. Like I don't have to go and buy every single flower. I just buy a bouquet and it's done for me.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah. And an ISA, just to break it down, if you haven't heard of it, is like a UK. I used to think that an ISA was like a special type of investment or, its own entity. But basically, all it's saying is if it's got that ISA label, that account is not liable for tax, is what it means. It's not anything in its own right. So like every single platform should have an ISA functionality, and it just refers to the tax. Like you're not going to have to pay tax on this when you sell it if you've made money. Basically, it's a huge tax perk being able to put money into an ISA because it's like money you can earn from it that you don't have to pay tax on. So they give you an allowance. At the moment, it's £20,000 a year that you can put into an ISA. Or a couple, you could split it between like a cash ISA or a stocks and shares ISA. There's lots of different types of ISAs as well. And then it resets every April, every new tax year. So it's kind of use it or lose it, basically. They don't all, if you haven't like put into it for years, you can't just use it all in 1 year. It's like every year it resets. You have 20K max you can put into it. You can just set up your direct debit. It's actually a really good idea, I think, to have everything automated if you can, because then you don't even have to think about it. And good way to think about it is if you can do a percentage, like if you could even start, if you get a platform with no minimums, you could start by 1% of your monthly income maybe, and maybe next year you could try and bump up to 2%. Or if you kind of know you want to be a bit more aggressive, you could be like, okay, I'm going to put 10% in. If you have the income to do that, you could pick a set amount and get it all set up on direct debit so it goes in there every month. I have one actually, speaking of the junior ISA, I do that for some of my friends' children because I was like, I don't want to buy them stuff. So I put £5 in a month for each of them.
Yeah.
And and then it will be there when they're 18, and also that I think they'll see. It's quite nice to be able to see how much stuff has grown and how it all works. So I think it's quite helpful in that way as well.
Going back to school and how important it is that we develop our children's understanding of money and how it works and how they can make it work for them. I think that's the key thing, because not everybody is going to have the same sort of lifestyle. They're not going to have the same level of income. They're not going to have the same dreams. Everyone, you've got to make money work for you, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one with the children as well, because I think it's also quite interesting for you to look back on, like, when you were growing up, did you know, like, what kind of was the story about money, even if you weren't told something explicitly, like what was the kind of implicit lessons that you learned about it, and how maybe that is impacting your life right now? I read this book that was really good. It's called You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. And I read it and I was like, oh, I have a really weird relationship with money. And like, it kind of makes you reflect on stuff like from your childhood, and you're like, oh yeah, there was some weird stuff I learned that probably actually isn't that helpful for me to believe right now.
We'll definitely put that in the show notes as well, because I think any sort of books, any resources that you mention, I think so helpful. So I will be checking out that one.
Have you ever wanted to go beyond the therapist's waiting room to find out what happens in counselling sessions? Join me on This Won't Fix You, where I take you into a library of interesting therapy-inspired ways to help you understand, and maybe even marvel at, what it is to be human. from our yearnings and motivations through to our frustrations and the patterns that block us as we muddle through life. I'm your host, Nadine Pittham, and on this show we talk about metaphors, models and images discovered or manifested through my work as an accredited psychotherapist. Each episode of This Won't Fix You has two branches. First, a 30 to 40 minute conversation between me and another qualified professional, which introduces and discusses the theory or idea in the spotlight. We call this the A side. And then the B side, where it's just you and me, and we go on a deeper exploration of that theory or idea from a more intimate, more therapeutic standpoint. While the show won't fix your problems, it will give you a better insight into how we live, think and feel. So maybe you want to hear about how kids' films like Frozen are essentially metaphors rooted in counselling theory. Or perhaps you want to make your sex life better by imagining your genitals and your brain going out to dinner together. Or maybe you just love chatting about stuff like shame or death. If that sounds like you, then go to the podcast app of your choice and subscribe to or follow the show. You can also visit our Facebook page or our website at thiswon'tfixyou.com. See you soon.
I don't remember, maybe just because they kept it away from us, but I don't remember them sitting down and talking to us about money. I mean, I suppose when I went off to university, mum and dad were very clear about me paying my way. So like I think I had like a career development loan from Barclays back in the day, and I had to pay that off, and it was quite a big chunk of money. And my dad said, I'm not going to cover that. I will help with your accommodation, but I won't cover that. This is the course that you want to do, so you've got to fund it. And it's like having that responsibility, isn't it, as a youngster, kind of going through school and going to university. And university's so expensive now as well. I mean, I don't know how anyone manages it.
And they've got rid of a lot of support as well, which I think, like a lot of those loans and grants that were available for people in certain like lower income households, they aren't available anymore. Like I don't actually know how people. Yeah, I got because I grew up it was just my mum's when I grew up income in the household. I got a grant, so it was essentially some money I didn't actually have to repay. But if I hadn't have had that grant, like I don't know, I guess I would have had to work a lot more at university. But I don't even know how I would have maybe done both. I think I got quite a useful amount of money. Like I don't know how I would have gone if you didn't have parental support. Maybe like you said, there are some like other like student overdrafts or something, but. Yeah, when I went, I could get a grant, and that doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, or it's really dramatically reduced. So there's actually, it's the whole uni thing is really tricky now.
Did you do financial planning at university?
No, so I actually did. It was kind of a business degree, but it was a retail focus, and then I actually worked in fashion buying for years in London. So I had a real random career change. We used to work in fashion, and then I ended up going to teach yoga in Spain, and it happened to be at a co-living space, which is a house that loads of remote workers lived in, and this was before COVID, so remote work wasn't as much of a thing. And I was there, and I was like, oh, I want to be remote. Like I want to be able to live wherever, and I can't. I actually live in Portugal now. I live in Lisbon.
Do you?
So I work with lots of people in the UK, and my work's very UK focused. I qualified as like a financial advisor with the London Institute of Banking and Finance. So everything is quite UK-ish, but I live in Lisbon, and that was like my big thing. And I think like the topic of creativity, like, I think of creativity, I'm like, I try and be quite creative with like maybe my life a bit more. Then I'm not someone that makes like art or anything like that. But I was at this house and I was like, I need to be remote. So I read the 4-hour work week. I was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? I started a loungewear brand with a friend that we closed, I think it was last year. And my years have gone really
honestly, the time just
yeah. And then one of the things I kind of realized, I was like, oh, I do know a lot about money and investing. Like this is what I've been doing for myself for years. So that was when I kind of started teaching the friends, and then tentatively kind of started talking about it online, maybe like 2021. Felt really uncomfortable. It didn't feel like it wasn't like a big, I was like, oh God, like I don't want to speak about money on the internet. Like people are a bit weird about it, and they're probably weird people on the internet, but I really was like, this is really useful information, and I know a lot about it, and it's something that I could do remotely. because my old career just wasn't transferable to be remote. You really have to be like in the office with the clothes. So yeah, that was kind of how I came into it. And it just came to me one day. I was like reading another book about money, and it just came in. It was like, you need to be sharing this with people. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then now I am.
I just find that so inspiring. I honestly do. Because you could have gone down the other route, but you had in your mind that you wanted to work remotely, and you've taken that chance and that risk, and it's paying off. How's Portugal?
I moved to Lisbon 3 years ago, and I still am just really obsessed with it, to be honest.
What is it about Lisbon that you love?
It's just, I always say like, it's so charming. My friends are like, stop saying it's charming. But when you walk around the streets, I love all the architecture and the buildings and the colours and the cobbles, and it's just beautiful. And also it's a small city, like very walkable. I think the things are like, I don't know if you've heard the phrase like third spaces. It's like a space that isn't your work and isn't your home. So there's lots of parks that everyone is hanging out in, and there's these kiosks that are, people sitting all night, and it's like a bit more outdoor culture, obviously, because it is warmer. So I'm just, and there's lots of amazing places you can drive to and get out of the city and really be in nature. And that was I basically had like requirements for a place. I didn't know where it was. I was like, I know I want it to be a small city with an international community where I can like get out and be in nature and hike at the weekends. That was like and then Lisbon just ticked all the boxes. So I was like, okay, I moved here. I'd never been here before. I just packed up all my apartment and shipped all the stuff, and was like,
wow,
just rocked up.
Did you go on your own?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I do have a big financial safety net behind me, and that I try and be quite open about that, because, that does help. Like, it is a privilege, and, I've had that. I've tried to like use the opportunities that I have to be able to, do things, and I don't take it for granted as well. It's like, lots of my friends here have done it in different ways, and, various ways of trying to get around Brexit and getting the visa and things like that. But, it is a big move.
It is a big move. It's really exciting. I'm very jealous.
It is, yeah. It's great. But it's been quite taken me quite a long time to like build. Yeah, it's like it is building a life from scratch, and like I've got now I've got amazing friends here, and I've got my places, but it's a lot just to rock up. I'm still not great at Portuguese.
But I mean, are you planning on staying there indefinitely, or are you going to come back at some point, or what's the plan?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would love to be on track here, and I kind of have in my head to be here at least 5 to 7 years, because I would get a passport as well. So it's given me a bit more of a timeline of like, okay, I'm on that is an available option here if you lived here for a certain amount of time. So like, let's do that. I really want to have the option, to live in Europe. I found, the EU, and we'll see. I don't know. I think it's really hard now. I've been out of the UK. It's weird because I'm not 100% at, I'm always going to be like a foreigner here. But now going back to the UK, like I don't have a sense of place there. Like my mum's moved somewhere random for retirement. My friends are very, very scattered. So I don't have really a sense of belonging in the UK. So it's like quite a weird, like, I don't know, we'll see where I end up. But I've kind of put myself in that different box now.
You don't need to be anywhere specific to do what you're doing, that you can move around, and there is a flexibility there and that freedom. When did you do your yoga training then?
That was quite a long time. I think that was 2018 I did that, and then I only ever taught in that co-living that I lived at, so it was on the roof every morning overlooking the sea. And I love yoga. I love the philosophy of it. Actually, after my dad died, I really delved into like all the philosophical side of it, because so much comes up around, okay, what's the meaning of life? But I've never actually taught. I haven't really taught since. I love it. I still go on some like trainings, and I love the idea of teaching, but it felt quite right. I haven't found the right. I feel like maybe it'll come back some point in my life. I don't know. I love it.
See where the road takes you. When you say you're not creative, you are creative in the way that you create your life. And I suppose, you are empowering your clients to also feel that way, that they have that control to make those decisions for their future selves and to get the most out of their money. Are there any myths that you really wish that people would just let go of?
Yeah, a lot of my work does focus somewhat on the investing side of things. I think money is such a big topic, but that side of things, because it is such a small, and like what gets me is I'm like, this is actually if you understand it enough, it's such a small switch. If you're someone who has the means to switch from a savings account to an investment account, the rule of thumb is it's like for something that you don't need to access for at least 5 years. So it's the long term, it's all this very long term perspective. Like just that one switch can be life changing. Like if like you're saying, if you do have a child that wants to go to university, if you do put it in an investment account and it's got 18 years to grow, it will probably get you a lot further than savings. If it always depends what's going on in the economy at the time you want to pull your money out. But if you go on, if you're curious, I would say go on the Hargreaves Lansdown investing calculator. If you Google that, there's a regular investing calculator and you can kind of type in, if I put in this much every month, and if you imagine you're going to get 8% return every year, so like your money will make you 8% every year on investments. It doesn't happen regularly like that. It happens very up and down. So like in the last year, it depends what you're invested in, but investments are up like 25-30%, depending on obviously where your money is. It can really vary. And then it will show you the difference. It will show you, if you were saving, it will show you you contributed this amount with your cash and your investments contributed this amount. And it's actually wild how much can come from just putting it in the investment account. As long as you need to understand it, like we were saying earlier, and be comfortable and get the risks and get, that things might be up and down when you need the money, and make sure it's a long-term thing. But it's just so powerful, one switch and like a little bit of information to know and have the confidence to do that, I think can be really life-changing. And that's what I think is, quite exciting about it, really, because it's not the number on the screen. It's like, what does that mean? Like if that means, if I get made redundant, I've got time to pivot because I've got a bigger financial runway to work with, or I'll have a year's worth of expenses in my savings account because I want to be able to try and start my own thing. And it's like they're big life things that are tied to money as well. And I think what's interesting is I know you talk about living creatively, and I think there's this big myth as well. This more like the psychological side that you can't make money maybe doing what you love. I would just love to challenge that a bit. We have an either or mindset, and it's like, can you switch that to an and? Like, I can make money and it be really fun, or I can make a lot of money and enjoy it. Because sometimes we don't realize we have these either or mindsets. Like I remember when I went into my fashion career, I remember thinking like, I don't care about money, I just want to enjoy my job, which is fine, but it was very much an either or mindset. Like it didn't feel possible to me that I could really enjoy what I wanted to do and make a good amount of money. And you don't realize that's a blind spot or a belief that you have. And then I started reading stuff like that book I was saying about like you're a badass making money, and I was like, oh yeah, I do have a belief around that. And finding people that have done it and make it possible, and then maybe it's like, oh, why not you?